Hello and welcome to another English podcast with Paul. We're back here again, and now it's a bit later in the day. So today, what we're talking about UFC fighting. Okay, so English podcast with Paul, natural, native, unscripted, unedited conversation discussing fighting today, fighting and young men. All right, I've got my glasses on today because I'm old and I can't see. I've got a lot of notes, all right? Like I said, it's unscripted and unedited, but I do have a lot of notes. So forgive me if you see me reading a little bit. This is some of the things I've been thinking about out loud. So here we go. If you're in a car, crank up the sound. If you're at home, crank it up and listen to my voice as you get on with your chores and do what you have to do around the house. Or if you're just sat down watching the video, enjoy. If you want, you can watch it on my website without the adverts. Always a big bonus. Okay, and you can watch many of them. Right then, so let's dive in. Like I say, UFC fighting. Ultimate Fighter champion, best of the best. All right, so we're talking like UFC is Ultimate Fighter Championships. So like it's a league, it's a division or whatever. So, like martial arts we're talking about here, martial arts. So we got judo, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, and lots of other aspects and parts, even some you might not have heard of. There's one called capoeira, which is very interesting, very much about dance. Well, on a dance and movement basis. And there's a famous capoeira movement artist as well that's got a YouTube following. Can't remember his name off the top of my head. It's a very difficult name to say, very odd. Anyway, right, I digress. So, martial arts have really been a big thing in the UK. Just going back thinking about like Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and Jean-Claude Van Damme with the film Bloodsports, in kickboxing films, The Kickboxer. So films again from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s really have sparked an interest for a lot of people in martial arts and exercise and self-defense. Again, it comes back to being manly and looking after yourself and protecting yourself and your wife and your family, that kind of thing. Why you'd have to protect yourself? Well, that all depends sometimes on the neighborhood you live in or the culture you grew up in. And as I said, I avoid it, but sometimes there is drunk men that want to fight, and sometimes being smaller makes me a bit of a target. And so as a young man, growing up, karate and taekwondo and jiu-jitsu were all very inspiring for a smaller man to think about protecting themselves. All right, so I'm just going to reference some of my notes because, like I said, there is quite a lot of them. And also, we sort of grew up in the era of Frank Bruno, Mike Tyson, and a few other English boxers that I forget off the top of my head now, which I may be kicking myself about later. Barry McGuigan, just to name a few. There were lots. All right, okay. Also in the early 1990s, I think there was a division in Asia called K2 or something similar to that, where lots more Asian kind of sports, lots more Asian kind of martial arts. I think it was mostly that kickboxing style, Thai boxing, that was very popular back then, but didn't really make it over to the West. So since 2000, the slow rise to acceptance of mainstream sports, accompanied by pay-per-view, bringing in millions. So I'm referencing UFC now, and the amalgamation of any other smaller fighting sports. I think we're on very small channels and small presence that slowly built and built, you know, the likes of MTV and other small production companies. And obviously that slowly snowballed with the licensing throughout America, like Las Vegas and places like that, exhibitions. And I know they've had a lot of hurdles to get through in regards to licensing and making it acceptable and changing like from bare knuckle fighting, which is well known in England, especially amongst the Romani travelers. There's a culture where they settle their issues with bare knuckle fighting, and it's all resolved and finished with, which actually seems to be a very efficient way of dealing with family issues and problems amongst men. So I kind of like that attitude and the way that the Romani gypsies live their life and do not get sucked into mainstream media, mainstream government regulations. That's one aspect I really like. Anyway, let's move on. So there was superstars coming up back then, like Forrest Griffin. Was it Forrest Griffin? Yeah, I think Forrest Griffin. The Iceman. I don't know if everybody knows his name. The Iceman. What was his name? Chuck Liddell. That's it. The Iceman, Chuck Liddell. And then he was quite a sensation and got a lot of following. And then he did really well. He had a good long career. And then there was like Rampage Jackson, another big, strong guy. I think often the heavyweights tend to get more money or garner more audience. So we had lots of people like that I grew up with in the early 2000s. And then it moved on, and then you end up with lots of other people in between. But cutting now to a bit more modern times, we're looking at Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, Khabib Nurmagomedov. I apologise, saying his wrong. Nurmagomedov. And there's a whole list of other really, really good up-and-coming fighters and fighters that are taking the championships. And I'm sure by the time this video is released, there'll be another champion for a different weight division. There are many weight divisions now. I can't keep track of how many, probably 5 or 6. And then there's the women's, and famous women have become very big in UFC with the likes of Ronda Rousey and Cyborg, Chris Cyborg. And then smaller opponents as well, Amanda Nunes and anyway, lots and lots of people have become famous. Some have even made it over into the film industry, such as Dave Bautista. Dave Bautista is now in Guardians of the Galaxy, the big guy called Drax. He was a UFC fighter. Rampage Jackson, he's been in some films. Most notoriously B.A. Baracus from the 18 remake film. Ronda Rousey has been in films, and a couple of other women I know that have been in films. So it is definitely a platform and a way to get into other industries. And I'm sure some of them have made really good money in different careers. For example, Joe Rogan. You've probably heard of him. He has a podcast that reaches millions of people. He's a very influential character. Not everybody's cup of tea, but he pretends to be stupid and pretends to be a little bit of a knucklehead, but actually he asks a lot of the questions that ordinary people like myself would like to know. He has a lot of very interesting guests on his show, from Neil deGrasse Tyson to, I don't know who else he's had on there. All sorts of people, various intellects up and down the spectrum. So just listening to his podcast, and I recommend anybody listen to Joe Rogan's podcast. Elon Musk, another famous person that's been on his show. His show is full of famous people, basically. And he pretends to be a knucklehead, but he listens and he allows the speaker to present. He doesn't judge anybody. He doesn't push his opinion on anybody. So it makes him a really good, engaging host to listen to. And obviously from this, he's becoming very intelligent. One of my other favorite speakers and motivational people would be Jordan Peterson. Again, a very intellectual person that also is humble and listens, tries not to judge, and understands that we are all human. So yeah, Joe Rogan was a UFC fighter. All right then. Lots of these people make a lot of money. You know, some of the numbers are astronomical, whether they're launching their own t-shirt brand or clothing brand or perfume brand or even whiskey from Conor McGregor. Lots of UFC fighters are using this to springboard their business careers. Some are just buying properties and making money that way. So my question really then is this a health obsession for men and women to vent their frustrations, improve their fitness, and connect with like-minded individuals in a positive environment? Or is it pie in the sky, filling young people's imaginations and head with dreams for fame, fortune, and respect, along with other issues of rage and anger issues? Let's think about that for a moment. Pie in the sky, dreams, money, fame, respect, or is it unrealistic? Is there a huge amount of people applying for this and trying to get in and going to these clubs and gyms where they just grapple and fight and practice and hone their rage into their opponent? Interesting. Not discounting women, there's a huge disconnect of young men in the place and their place in modern Western society. That's quite sad. That's quite sad. Especially if you have an average education, live in a deprived area, and missed out on a positive role model in your most impressionable years. So I can say that's the case for me. I was brought up in a bit of a deprived area, not, you know, for the West Country. You know, don't get me wrong, there wasn't stabbings and mass shootings or fighting going on, but for my little quiet part of the world, my little part of the UK, it was a bit rough and ready, and I didn't have a role model to look up to. I didn't really feel like I fit in. I wasn't very sporty, I wasn't very big, I wasn't very strong, and so I felt quite lost in my impressionable years. So I'm connecting with how I feel about the same scenarios. Previously, the only options were military, gangs, being in young fatherhood with questionable coping mechanisms and wavering mental health. Because there's a lot of pressure on men these days to be a father figure, to be a good citizen, to be soft and gentle and caring and empathic. I feel it myself. And I don't know if it's a society thing or whether we've got things wrong, that it's very easy to point the finger at a man or a male with anger and communication issues. Because a lot of the time now in primary schools and play schools, guns and sticks are really pushed out. There's a real shortage of female. There's a real shortage of male role models in schools, and because schools naturally have a higher number of females, there tends to naturally be higher amounts of estrogen, or whatever the hormone is, with empathy and love and care. And so that is pushed, which is fine for the girls and for the feminine types that prefer that. But as boys, there's not much positiveness in allowing boys to express their courage, their curiosity, their risk aversion, and how to communicate roughly and from an early age, because there's the balance of lots and lots of women. And more so in these deprived areas, there's probably more women social workers, and probably more women single parents, and probably more women, I don't know, nurses or support. So there's a lot of the care industry is heavily female orientated, which pushes out or it doesn't allow to foster that male natural tendencies and male natural courage and bravery and all the positive aspects of the male stereotypes. So we talk a lot about supporting women and allowing women to be feminine, and how the womb is very important. And yes, it is very important, I agree. But there's also the other side. There's also men that aren't being allowed to express themselves. Because without men, you wouldn't have soldiers. You wouldn't have as many firefighters. You wouldn't have... Oh, don't get me started. Anyway, I digress. So, with fighting training gyms prevalent, is this a good or a bad thing for our young men? Right. So in my experience of 10 years in the care industry, working with young, confused, agitated and angry young people that learned that aggression behavior gets attention, these vulnerable young people rarely learn how to communicate in a healthy way, combined with low self-esteem and fear of missing out. Because even if you're in care, you still see other people, other young people having a good time. Maybe having an expensive bicycle, maybe having a happy family, or at the park doing some good things, positive things. So just because these lads and lasses are in care, they still see and want those things, which sometimes breeds... What does it breed? It breeds jealousy, enviousness, contentment, and things like that. Right, so what else have I said here? So, where do we go? Social media, TV, struggling fiercely to find a run on the ladder in the workforce. That is another problem as the young men become pushed out of the care system, and young people are trying to learn their way and find their path. You know, dealing with other men, dealing with other situations where they are unable to communicate with this anger and frustration in early workplace and colleges. So I kind of feel that, and I'm open here to your suggestions and your thoughts. I'm very much open to listening and having a conversation. But I kind of feel that these kind of adorned gladiator sports, these idolized gladiator sports with young people can be really influenced with a lot of these fighting gyms. And I mean more the modern fighting gym, not the old school boxing gym where the owner or one of the trainers would take you under your wing, teach you how to be disciplined and controlled and communicate and put you in your place when you're getting above your station, when you're becoming too aggressive or too arrogant. You know, these trainers will put you in your place, and you would learn and go, right, okay, yeah, I need to know my place. You've got to start at the bottom and work you up. Build that respect. Build that respect and that place within your community. You know, slowly, bit by bit. You got to earn that place. And today's young people don't know that. They don't know how to earn their place in society. So kind of like in conclusion, I feel we've got a growing problem of undirected, confused young people. That they are a vulnerable part of society, desperately in need of a cause to get behind. Some cultures insist on university and are very strong with their families. Other cultures insist on military service. Now, I discussed this with my wife earlier, and she seemed to think that would be a really good idea if we insisted on national service. But I said to her, one, I really didn't feel like authority of being told what to do by another man that I didn't respect or didn't know is not my cup of tea. It would not work for me. And I said, I always refused to go into the military, although most of my family did. Much of my family went in the military from what I can recall. So I never went down that route. I wasn't looking forward to it, and I really didn't want to do it. Whether that was... but my wife said that may have been the case in the first few weeks or few months, but it may have made you into a really good, strong, rounded person. And after reflecting on what she said, I thought, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Maybe I would have been physically stronger. I'd have been in amongst my peers, considered equal, and felt like I had direction. I may have stayed in the military for a long time because I see the benefit of being part of something and being employed and making money and having a focus and a direction. So I think now, on reflection, I may have done really, really well. I'm not easily persuaded by other groups of peers, and I'm really an individual to make my own mind up. So yeah, maybe I would have done really, really well. Well, we'll never find out now. Okay, so what else do we said? So yeah, we still have this disconnect with loyalty and families. And there's a quote that says, tough men make easy times, and easy men make for really tough times. That sounds quite interesting, quite deep. I guess it does. I guess it does. So, will this be the demise of society? Will this new generation define their own way in valuable society, whether it be entertainment with arguments settled in the UFC? Will there be a future? Will there be a rise of some other gladiator sport that's idolized? You know, such as slapping the faces of each other. And that is actually a real sport now, part of UFC, slapping one another's face. Interesting. Will that be taken over by some big corporate organization? I don't know. So there's lots to think about here. There's lots to think about. Young men and women that are of a certain age and without a role model is becoming more and more common. It's sad that the Western society, we don't have this family structure like there is in Asia. And often people that leave Asia and come to the West for work and money send a lot of it back. And a lot of it goes back to the hierarchy of the eldest person in the family and gets dished out from there. And so there would be money given to somebody that wants to put a deposit down on a house, or somebody that wants to start a family, or a young person that's going to university. They kind of have this banking system where all the money is pooled together. And that seems very wise and very smart. And families tend to stay in the same house for a lot longer. And so you build up this pool, this finances, this support network. You know, a family of cousins and brothers and aunties and uncles, and where everybody helps one another to get up in the ladder of buying your own home. And one of my students said that where he lived, people don't rent. They stay at home until they've got a deposit to buy. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. Not renting, not wasting your money, putting it in for your family and your future, and that money being pooled together as a bank. It's very clever. And so the young people in the West don't have that. House prices in the West are skyrocketing. So unless you're extremely wealthy, there's not much chance of ever getting on that ladder, that housing ladder. It's a real shame. So who are going to support our new young people? That wing, that shoulder to support, that role model that's missing. Is it a good idea to continue to allow this entertainment, these TV shows, and letting the media run and direct the minds of our vulnerable young athletic individuals? Because I think other sports are still a positive direction. There's often a good role model, male or female, within sport. So whether you're swimming or playing rugby or football, there's often some good role models and some focus and some direction. And yes, maybe your career may be short-lived, but the sport keeps going and you can participate in other ways. You can give back by helping other young people that are coming into the sport. You know, even a youth centre. I spent time as a young man in the youth club. It's a good place to meet other people, other friends, and there's often some good role models that are running the youth hostel, the youth centre. So I think that's a good idea. Sports and things like that. But hitting a punch bag, learning to fight without a role model and without some clear direction from people that care about you, where you're not just a number in a gym, pay your money, do your training, go home, and you're just a number. Without that support and role model, I think it is very dangerous. Very dangerous. Well, there's a lot for us to think about there. I feel like I haven't reached a real conclusion other than the necessity for good role models. Maybe you could be a role model. Let me know in the comments. This is a conversation. I'd like to know your thoughts, your feelings. How does it work in your household, in your culture? Let me know in the comments below. Tell me, how does it work for you? How do you feel that you fitted in with your past? I'd be interested to know. Okay, that's it for now. That's all we got time for. As always, thanks for listening. And remember, have fun. Have fun. Keep learning English and have fun with it. Right, take care. See you in the next video. Bye for now.